This year, you chose generosity. You chose justice. You chose community. You showed up for strangers in need and raised $73.5 million for Ukraine relief. You helped resettle countless refugees around the world. You spoke up and demanded change for our communities across North America. You helped raise $250 million to secure our communities from hatred and violence, allowing us all to continue flourishing. You redefined endless connections to Israel. You connected a new generation to tradition and history, paving the way for our future. This year, you championed change. This year, you championed community.
First and foremost, I want to take this opportunity to simply say thank you for being here. I'm Julie Platt, Chair of Jewish Federations of North America. The act of being here is not simply the passive act of clicking on a Zoom link. Rather, all of you, lay leaders and professionals, have made a conscious choice to be an active participant in doing sacred work and ensuring that our collective remains strong for those who rely on us each and every day. Despite the challenges of the 2+ past years, you are here because of our shared sense of belief in giving to those what we ourselves have been given. We are all the beneficiaries of someone's legacy, and you, through your work, through your leadership, and through your faith, are leaving a legacy for those generations who will follow in your footsteps. Thank you. Over the next 2 days, we will hear from experts in the field of philanthropy, including some of our peers and colleagues who are doing incredible work in communities throughout the Federation system. Our goal is to provide participants the opportunity to learn with and from each other, to reconnect with why we do this important work, and to reflect on the challenges of the past 2.5 years and recharge so that we may face the challenges ahead with the tools, skills, and most importantly, the partners, the humans in our system to be successful. We have so much about which to be proud. Our system, you, continue to answer the call in times of crisis, pandemic, war in Ukraine, new waves of Ethiopian Olim. In fact, a plane load of whom just this moment arrived in Israel. Rising anti-Semitism. You have answered the call again and again and again. It would be nice if the phone didn't ring quite so much. I hope that you will take a moment during our time together over the next 2 days, or as you prepare for the coming of Rosh Hashanah, to reflect on all that we have been through together and reconnect with your big why. Each of us has a why that drives us. However, in challenging times, we sometimes lose sight of our own personal motivation to doing this work. For me, it's setting an example for my 5 children and my grandchildren with my actions and with my words, and sharing with them my passion for the Jewish people. For me, I hope you will get in touch with your big why. I would like you to take a moment and think about it. And if you feel comfortable, please share it in the chat. And now it is my honor to introduce to you Rabbi Shoshana Gelfand. Rabbi Gelfand is an inspired teacher, and I'm grateful to say I have been the direct recipient of her inspired teaching. But to give you just a flavor, Shoshana is the Director of Leadership and Learning at Pears Foundation in London, having previously served as Vice President of the Wexner Heritage Foundation. Shoshana is intensely involved in interfaith work as a visiting scholar at Sarum College and a visiting research fellow at St. Bennett's Hall in Oxford University. She is founding faculty member of Faith in Leadership, providing training to senior Muslim, Jewish, and Christian leaders in the UK. She also liaises with the Vatican as part of the International Jewish Committee on Interreligious Consultations. She is a regular public speaker and an author of the Barefoot Book to Jewish Tales. She was ordained as a rabbi at the Jewish Theological God forbid, Jewish Theological Seminary. And I could go on, but then it would diminish the time you get to learn from Rabbi Gelfand. Shoshana, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Julie. If it makes you feel any better, we used to refer to it as the cemetery as well. I am so delighted to be joining you all from London. It's quite an auspicious day here of tradition and of watching our Queen as she moves towards her final resting place. And it makes me very proud of my British identity. But being with you all is a reminder of where I come from. And where I come from is very much Jewish Federations of North America, as you can hear from my accent, which still has a little bit of America in it. I want to talk to you today about stories. And to start out, I want to tell you a story that Elie Wiesel loves to tell. And now he loves to tell many stories, but this one is special. This one is special because it's a story about stories. And I think it's a story about you. So listen and see whether you can hear why this is a story about you. It's a Hasidic tale about the Baal Shem Tov, who used to go and pray for the Jewish people at a special place in the forest. And he would go whenever they were in danger, and he would find that special place, and he would light a fire, and he would say a prayer, and disaster would be averted. Well, time went by, and the next generation, the Baal Shem Tov's student had to do this task. And he was the only person who knew the place in the forest, so he would go there, but he didn't know how to light the fire. So he said the prayer anyway, and he hoped it would be enough. And indeed, it was enough, and disaster was averted. But in the next generation, they couldn't remember the prayer either. So they just went to the special place in the forest, they asked for help, and again, it was enough. But finally, as the generations passed and the Jewish people were in danger once again, the next generation needed God's help. And not only didn't they know the prayer or how to light the fire, but they couldn't even remember the place in the forest. But they remembered the story. And they told the story, and that was enough. When Elie Wiesel tells this story, he always ends it by saying, God made human beings because God loves stories. Well, not only does God love stories, but we do also. And by we, I mean the Jewish people, but I also mean fundraisers. You are the master storytellers. And Federation fundraisers are the master storytellers of the Jewish people. You're the one who tells the story, and disaster is averted. So I want us to take a little time to look at stories, because I think that fundraising is perhaps the most Jewish possible activities, since it is based on stories. So I'm going to share my screen because I want to show you visually something that fascinated me. Kurt Vonnegut, the great American author, he wrote his master's thesis in anthropology. It actually was not accepted, but his master's thesis was positing that there are only 6 archetypal stories. There's only 6 kinds of stories that can be told. And in fact, they did some research recently, I'll share my screen as I'm describing this, where they put 1,000 different works of fiction into a powerful computer to see whether this was true. And indeed, there are only 6 story shapes. Now, I'm not talking about the content of stories. I'm talking about the shape of the story. So here's what I mean. Here's the first story shape. This story is a well-known one. Rags to riches, right? This is my grandfather who came to America from Russia with nothing and made it. Made it so that his son became the doctor, right? This was rags to riches, and this is one of the fundamental story shapes. We love it, right? Think of all the great movies and great pieces of literature that are rags to riches stories. But we also quite like the opposite. What is that story? I mean, I'm talking to you from the land of Shakespeare. Great Shakespearean tragedies, right? There are times that we listen to a story because it is tragic. And one of the things we know about life is that sometimes the best you can do is bear witness to suffering. You can't change it, but you also can make sure that the story is heard. As I'm going through these 6 types, I want you to be thinking about how you use these different stories, which ones you use, when and how and where, both in your work, but also in your life. So those are 2 basic story types, and you can see they mirror each other. Well, sometimes a story is a little more complicated. How about this one? Do you remember the story of Icarus in Greek myths, where he and his father are in a prison and they decide to escape by flying, and they fly out the window of the prison. So they're in a bad place at the beginning, and they fly out the window and they're free. And you think, this is a rags to riches story. Everything's going to be fine, except Icarus flies too close to the sun and his wings melt and he comes crashing into the sea. So the Icarus shape is one of those, well, as my teenage son likes to say, it sounded like a good idea at the time, Mom, right? But it all ended in disaster. Well, what happens if we flip that one around? We get the 4th story type. And the 4th story type is what authors like to call man in the hole, right? You're walking along, everything seems fine, the sun is shining, oops, you fall into the hole. And then the drama is, how do you get yourself out of that hole? And that one seems to be even more interesting and more appealing to us, at least in the West. It's a very, very popular story type. We like it when people are going along, they reach a difficulty, and somehow, through hard work, through connections, through whatever it is, they get themselves out of that hole, and triumph is snatched from the jaws of defeat. In fact, we like this one so much that quite often, when we're in a tragedy arc, somebody will come up to us when we're at the bottom, in the hole, and they try to make it into a man in hole story. Has anyone ever come up to you when you're really suffering from something and say, but you learned something, didn't you? That is an attempt to make this into a man in whole. That is an attempt to find some sort of redemption in a tragic story. And that's a human impulse that we have. And I'll say a few words about it later on, about the psychological impact of that impulse. But first, I'll give you the last 2 story types, because of course, life is a little bit more complex than some of these story arcs that we've looked at have allowed. So Oedipus, the great story of Oedipus. You find stories that have more than one inflection. Oedipus starts out as, everything's going fine. Oh, things go horribly wrong. Then things get better. And you think we're going to end here, but no. And it ends in tragedy. But it's a more interesting kind of tragedy than a straight line down. And likewise, Cinderella, right? Cinderella starts, poor Cinderella. Well, the fairy godmother comes and it looks like everything's going to be okay. And we think the story's going to end there, but no, she has to run away from the ball. and she loses her slipper and it looks like things will end in tragedy. And then we love this Disney ending, don't we? No, 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 the prince finds her and everything's fine. So some of these stories get more complex, of course they do. Now, the bit that I think is interesting is which of these stories resonate for you? And particularly, which ones have resonated for you over the past 2 years? We have dealt with wave after wave of challenges. We have had COVID, we have had war, we have had security issues and a rise in anti-Semitism. We've had divisiveness in our political systems. We have had one after another, and I'm curious about what kinds of stories have you been telling about these? So we're going to launch a little poll for you and put it up there, and go ahead and just give us an indication of which of these 6 archetypes has resonated most for you. Oh, we've got a rags to riches. That's interesting. Now they're coming in fast and furious. Oh, this is fascinating. Can you all see this as it's going? Oh, excellent. Good. We've got a little bit of Icarus. I feel like I'm narrating a horse race here. And Cinderella is in the lead, but Man in Hole is close behind. This is really interesting. So all 6 of these are clearly resonating for you in some way. But Cinderella is very, very strong. Man in Hole is quite strong. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm really, really curious whether people can put into chat a little bit of an explanation of why those 2 seem to be so strong for you. What is it about those story arcs that's resonating for you? I'll give you a second to type. I wish we were all in a room together, right? Because then we could get the depth of your explanations. Jennifer is saying, persevering through a struggle. And Jill's saying, seeing someone persevere through a difficulty gives me a sense of hope. That's going to be an important word for us, hope. Stuart saying, initially lost clients, then retired them and having freedom and fun. Good for you, Stuart. Pam is noticing they end positively. This yearning that we have for a happy ending, even if it's not 100% happy, something that redeems the story. And Wendy says that despite the challenges, we're optimistic for the future. Elisa's saying there's opportunities for the characters to learn about themselves. Oh gosh, Jill, Man in the Hole, watching my kids really struggle with the lockdown and fighting back. Indeed, there's a difference between the tragedy story, which is this is awful. COVID is awful. My children are suffering, learning from home, and a slightly different story, which is this is awful. My children are suffering, learning from home, and they're learning resilience and flexibility and all kinds of skills that are going to help them in the future. Those are different stories. You are fundraisers. You are expert storytellers. So part of what I wanted you to start thinking about during the session is those story arcs. How do you tell your stories? I'm going to share my screen again, because I want to draw upon the wisdom of a really extraordinary man. Many of you have read the work of Viktor Frankl. He died 25 years ago. He was a Holocaust survivor, and his book, Man's Search for Meaning, is a very thin volume, but one that I would recommend to bring with you to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services. Yes, the rabbi is telling you to bring a book to services. I really believe in that. It's too long to just sit there and not have something to engage your mind in addition to what's going on in the room. Get Man's Search for Meaning and read it, because what he does is not only talk about his experience in the camps, but he talks about how he developed what he called logotherapy. And what he says and what he teaches is that you can't always change reality. The only thing you have control over is how you approach reality. So I love, love, love this quote by him. The one thing you can't take away from me is the way I choose to respond to what you do to me. The last of one's freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. I hesitate sometimes using this quote because people are not always in a place where they're strong enough to change their narratives. But I love this quote because it empowers us to do so. We cannot change some of the awful things that are happening in the world, but we are storytellers. You are storytellers squared, right? Jews are storytellers and fundraisers are storytellers. So you are storytellers squared. And I want you to start to think about your expertise in storytelling and which of these story shapes you think would be most beneficial, not just for Jewish federations, of course, for Jewish federations, because there's so much important work, but also for your lives, for your clients' lives, for your families' lives, for our country's life. What are the stories that we need to tell? And which arc can we use? It won't surprise you to know that those stories, the research on the stories that end with the redemptive ending, those tend to be told by people who have higher psychological well-being. Which causes which, I can't tell you. It's like that phenomenon where if you're not feeling happy, but you smile and other people smile back at you, it feeds the loop. We're going to talk a bit more tomorrow about Jewish stories and what makes a story Jewish. But a little bit of, I won't call it homework, I'll just call it thought work between now and then, is to ask yourself, maybe over dinner tonight, have a chat with whoever you're having dinner with, maybe in your sessions today, maybe with your colleagues, have a thought about these questions. What stories are you currently telling about yourself? What are the stories you're currently telling about those who you love? What are the stories you're telling about your organization? What are the stories you're telling about the world right now? And for all of those stories, to ask yourself, are these stories serving you well? Not are these stories true? There's lots of ways to tell true stories. Remember, I gave the example of my children suffering and not being in school. That's a true story. So is the story that ends, and they learned a lot about resilience and flexibility and how strong they are. Those are both true stories. So the question is not necessarily whether the story is true, it's which true story do I want to tell? Are there other also true stories that might serve my purpose better? So I leave you with that thought. I also leave you with the end quote from our story from the beginning. God made human beings, and I'll add, and fundraisers, because God loves stories. I wish you a wonderful conference filled with meaningful stories. And as the next chapter in this particular story of our opening plenary, I want to turn it over to Gary Torgow, JFNA's new National Campaign Chair. I will see you again tomorrow.
Hello, and thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction and those wonderful words, Rabbi. Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much to each of you for your service to the Jewish people. Sorry about that. We are just about 2 weeks away from the beginning of the holiest days on the Jewish calendar, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which are a critical time of renewal, where we each reflect on our own relationship with the King of Kings, the Almighty, and our fellowship and responsibilities to all of his children that are scattered across the globe. Monarchy and royalty are so much in the news today, and they carry many meanings and definitions to different people in different places. The news, of course, is filled with the passing of Queen Elizabeth, who is being mourned by so many across the world and remembered as a benevolent and kind ruler. A ruler, it seems, to whom service of her people was primary. Yet we Americans way back when rejected the earthly monarchy of Great Britain and have led to the Western world embracing democracy. So why do so many of us share in the mourning of the passing of the Queen today? The answer, of course, lies not within the title President, Prime Minister, King, or Queen, but rather with an uplifted human being fulfilling their role of good deeds during their lifetime. Queen Elizabeth's embrace of her duty to her people is what we all agree distinguished her as an outstanding leader. In fact, great leadership is always defined by giving and by service to others, by being bigger than yourself. As we approach the Jewish New Year, we reflect on those who lead lives of dedication to others. I think today often of my own service to the Jewish people and so appreciate the ability that God has given me, like all of you, to be givers and not in the position of needing to take. It's a real privilege, but an awesome undertaking, which we should all be grateful and thankful for. As JFNA's national campaign chair, I feel a bit inadequate when following so many incredibly talented lay leaders. Julie Platt, our revered chairperson, at the top of that list. During my 10 years as campaign chair, I hope that I will serve as an assist to many of you as we endeavor to raise critical and needed resources for so many vital causes, including support for the Ukrainian refugees, for the safety and security of our Jewish communities worldwide, and for the ongoing battle against anti-Semitism, and also for uplifting and inspiring of Jews across all of our communities. Our common goal that I know you all share is to provide as many members of our community's next generation with the opportunity to celebrate their Judaism at summer camps, at Israel experiences, and to help them explore their own personal journey as a Jew in the 21st century and beyond. As Julie said in her opening remarks, this work is sacred, and I am really humbled to join all of you and hundreds of others in this effort. One of the most beautiful lessons I have learned as a volunteer in my local community of Detroit is that the surest path to a strong, vibrant, and committed Jewish community is through a foundation of unity and achdus amongst every Jew, no matter their economic, their social, or their religious placement in the community. When we all begin with the premise that every member of the Jewish community is royalty in the eyes of the Almighty, there is nothing we cannot do and nothing we cannot accomplish. The challenges that we face together as a collective, and the successes that we will enjoy will be clearly defined by this principle of unity and royalty of every person in our communities. So let's always keep uppermost in our minds that a key element of fundraising is not to be bashful to ask, because the stakes are so high today and the needs are so great. I'm really excited about the opportunity to see your work up close in the coming months, and I hope that part of my focus will be to share the story of your work with many others in our system so that we can continue to learn from each other. I hope that during these hours together, everyone will have an opportunity to identify areas that make you feel encouraged and excited for the coming year, And if you feel comfortable, please share those thoughts in the chats. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing an outstanding member of JFNA's professional team who is going to facilitate the next session, Amanda Goldstein. Amanda is the Vice President of Philanthropy and FRD at JFNA. She's a senior philanthropic professional and a strategic manager with a lot of experience in securing leadership gifts and growing meaningful philanthropic programs. We're grateful that Amanda joined the Jewish Federations of North America in January of 2021. And in her role, she leads and oversees JFNA's national fundraising initiatives, which are broad and important. And in addition, she partners with the field to develop and implement comprehensive fundraising strategies for the Federation system across the country. For those that don't know Amanda, prior to her joining the JFNA, she was the Deputy Chief Development Officer for the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia. And in that role, she was responsible for overseeing all the aspects of unrestricted and restricted fundraising for the Federation. Amanda developed the program and secured the funding for the Sharon and Joseph Kestenbaum Legacy Philanthropy Program, a really neat program which is designed to cultivate the next generation of Jewish leaders with significant philanthropic capacity to invest in the Jewish community. Amanda is originally from New York City. She got her BA from Barnard and her MSW from the University of Pennsylvania. She lives in Marion Station, Pennsylvania with her husband, Scott, and their 5 children. Amanda no doubt has her hands full, but I know from what I have heard and learned, she's fully capable. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all of your efforts. It's my great pleasure to introduce Amanda Goldstein and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Gary, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for your leadership as our national campaign chair. Personally, I'm so excited to work closely with you to lift up the efforts of all of our professional and lay partners throughout the system, working to increase dollars and donors to our collective campaign. On that note, I want to congratulate and thank all of you who have taken time today out of your busy schedules to participate and learn together at FRDLX. The efforts we have seen in the field over the past 2.5 years, largely led by those of you on this Zoom, have surpassed all of our goals. Through our campaigns for high priority initiatives like COVID and the Ukraine emergency campaign, we've seen new donors flock to the Federation system in waves. We've seen our tried and true donors dig deeper to increase their philanthropic support, and we've seen innovative new ways to engage community members in our work. As a Federation system, we also have new realities to deal with. Many of our federations have experienced significant turnover. We're dealing with slimmed down staffs. Collectively, we're looking at all of our needs and redesigning our campaigns to support new priorities like mental health, security, increasing our activity and civic engagement, while continuing to need the dollars for our core commitments, which are so important every day. So today, in this session, as we're looking to kick off so many of our campaigns, it's natural and strategic to ask from these turbulent times, what lessons continue to resonate? What have we learned and how has our practice changed over these 2.5 years? From my seat at JFNA, I am so privileged to work with many of you and learn best practices to share across the system. While there's no one secret to creating growth and sustainability in these times, we'll see if the panelists disagree with me, we can share some best practices that we've learned across the board yield results. When federations focused on relationship-based fundraising, we see growth in campaigns. When federations create select strategies to focus on the high end of growing their campaign, we see growth in annual fund dollars and campaigns. When we can demonstrate our impact to our donors and when we can creatively engage the community in our work, we see growth. We'll hear more about all of these strategies from our panelists. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleagues and friends who have this knowledge on the ground. We have 4 practitioners with us today. Their bios can be found on the LX website, but it is my pleasure to introduce my colleagues who I continue to learn from, and I'm so privileged to work closely with. Meredith Dragon, the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Rochester. Mark Medin, the Executive Vice President of UJA New York. Brian Eglash, the Senior Vice President and Chief Development Officer at the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. And Kelly Smith, the Foundation Director for the Jewish Federation and Foundation of Northeast Florida. Later in the afternoon, our panelists will be leading afternoon workshops for professionals, and lay leaders will have their own special track. These will be led so that communities can delve deeper into these strategic questions that are on our minds, regardless of the size and scope and culture of our communities. So as we begin, I wanted to start with each of our panelists and ask each of you, and I guess I will call on you, ask each of you, how has your leadership changed to support your team and engage lay leaders post-pandemic? And Meredith, since you're first on my screen, maybe I'll start with you.
Thanks, Amanda. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure that my leadership has changed so much, but I think what we've been able to do is double down on our core competencies, including relationship building, constant communication, and building trust between our staff and our lay leadership. So yeah, not much change, but doing what we do best.
Great, thank you. Mark.
I think the key issue is all about communication, and Rabbi Gelfand talked about storytelling. I think the key to our success over the past 2.5 years has been our ability to tell a story, to communicate, to make sure that our leadership and our major donors are closely connected to our work, even when they couldn't see the work firsthand, because we were all stuck at home. How we effectively communicated to them through Zoom, through sharing information, through an open and transparent line of discussion in what the needs were in the community, how we were responding to those needs, and why we needed their support enabled us to be successful. So for me, it's all about communication and the ability to tell an effective story, which leads to successful campaigns.
Great, thank you. Kelly, same question for you. How have you seen your leadership change?
Sure. So we leaned into relationships, and like Mark just shared, storytelling was absolutely a part of that. But we really increased our stewardship efforts, and our recognition is free. So we did a lot more recognizing people and thanking them. We increased our numbers of lay leaders that were writing thank you notes and on thank you call campaigns, and it paid off in the long end. Donor retention was good, and people truly felt not only more appreciated, but they felt as though they knew where their dollars were going. And it certainly added to our plate with, like you said, Amanda, we had fewer staff. Here in the foundation alone, I got to learn the ins and outs of every aspect of how the foundation worked, entering distributions and sending things out. And I was able to add those personal touches to things, because I was even more hands-on with fewer staff. So the personal touch and really engaging and leaning into the relationship so that we could retain the donor and hopefully grow them, when things normalize again.
Great, thank you. And Brian, turning to you. We need to unmute you. Brian, we're 2.5 years in.
I will never learn. Still in denial. I always say it's all about relationships. And clearly, whether it was, we're going to talk about other crises besides the pandemic, even before any of the major crises occurred over the last 4 years in our community, we've always had a really strong lay professional relationship. And many years ago, we did pivot to relationship-based fundraising, taking a holistic approach. However, with the Tree of Life massacre and then a pandemic within a less than 2 year period, and then other crises, whether it's a war in Israel or a crisis in Ukraine, those relationships and trust really paid off. Both our partnership with our lay leaders, which we can get into a little bit later, but also our partnership with our donors, and of course our trust in staff. And it's really paid off, at least in our community, where we're continuing to see an upward trajectory and campaign in plan giving and endowments, which are two major streams, as well as other streams. But those relationships are everything and really the core of what powers us.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you all. And one of the things that keeps coming up is kind of like, as we look backwards and as we look forwards, kind of crisis as the norm. And what have we learned? And as we move through an initial crisis that became a second crisis and a third crisis, and now crisis as the norm, we've moved from crisis fundraising to crisis as the norm fundraising. And in light of this new reality, we were hoping to share some growth strategies with the FRDLX community. So Mark, can you share with us how you're approaching this new reality with crisis as the norm?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it is the new reality. I think the key issue for everyone to think about is, what are our donors' potential and capacity to step up and give more money? And we all know that when there is a crisis, whether it's a hurricane or a war in Israel or a pandemic or Ukrainian refugees, donors step up and they proactively want to be more helpful and more supportive. And what we need to understand is they all have the capacity to give more. And so when a donor makes an additive gift that's crisis related, the opportunity for us as fundraisers, whether professional fundraisers or lay leaders that are such critical partners in our campaign, is how do we try and turn that additive emergency gift into an ongoing gift that then becomes a new base gift for the donor. So if someone's a $10,000 donor and during COVID, when they're seeing all the emergency needs in their community, they throw in another 10,000. How do we go back to them the following year and begin the conversation about them being a $20,000 donor and not a $10,000 donor who made an additive $10,000 gift? And if we can reset them at a $20,000 level, we inherently then grow the foundation of our campaign, which then becomes an ongoing, stronger foundation for years to come. And so how we take advantage of these opportunities and strategically have the conversation with our donor that lets them understand that while they may have made the additive gift in the times of crisis, there are ongoing needs all the time that their increased gift can support. And if we can build those foundations and continue to strengthen, and each time we build the foundation like that, we add another floor to the building. And so suddenly a 13-story building becomes a 17-story building, becomes a 21-story building, and your campaign has a stronger foundation and continues to grow. And then every time you bring in a new donor or you have a great event that brings in new money, you're now adding that money on top of a stronger base and a higher foundation. And I think that's the key to our success and our long-term growth.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know that is a question that comes up in every group on every Zoom, and so important to think about crisis donors becoming longtime donors. And to that point, Brian, I wanted to turn to you and talk about how Mark's answer about converting donors kind of parallels with our opportunity to lead. And as a leader in an organization, especially in Pittsburgh, that have dealt with community crises that are close to home, as well as global crises, how do you ensure that your organization is ready to handle these as they come up?
Yeah, and like our community was pretty unique, given the massacre at the Tree of Life, then a pandemic, and then some other emergencies. So again, the relationships really, really matter, and the core work of Federation, our day in and day out work, really positions us to lead. And one of the things that we said early on back in October of 2018, right after the massacre, was we would, our mantra really from the beginning was, we were there on the 27th of October, a few hundred feet from the Tree of Life while the murderer was in the building, organizing, strategizing, and implementing our communal response, only because we were here on the 26th, the 25th, the 24th, and for 100 years before, prior, doing what we always do. And no one can do this vast amount of work, such as a federation, bring our key agencies together to lead strategy and provide the funds that impact both locally and globally. This is relevant to any one of our federations. And we that's part of the power of what we're trying to do with our collective impact funds through the campaign. So there's no order of importance, how we are positioned in order to respond to that outside of having those core dollars that we raise. But one is to have a really, really strong team. And I'm both lay and professional. And, whether it was during COVID, during the massacre, any other emergency, a core team of professionals is key. And in fact, during the time of the massacre, our chair of the board was in every one of those meetings, which was an incredible partnership. Getting your lay leadership to be your partners, and of course, to buy into whatever plan it might be, whether it's COVID or any other emergency. Donor trust, and again, that's about relationships. Whether it's a pandemic where we're all in lockdown, you can still reach out to people, whether over the phone or over Zoom or maybe an outdoor meeting. Never ever let up on that. Who knows what's going to happen in the future, but we need to continue that, ratchet that up. That builds the trust and has built the trust for us. Being a convener, convening our agencies during times of crisis. I don't need to comment anymore. Being that lead community planner, and especially, security related, but there's so many other issues, whether it's cemeteries, whether it's, seniors, whatever the issue is, but security is a major issue in all of our communities. And the Federation is really the only entity uniquely positioned to tackle that issue. We have, through our community relations professional and our marketing professional, put together a crisis management plan. Having that crisis management plan, we did have a crisis communications plan prior to the massacre in 2018. That was really, really important for us that we had that. And I'm probably missing a bunch of other things, but one last point is engaging through the Federation network. It's coming to the FRDLX, but someday hopefully it'll be in person. Going to GAs, going on these missions where you meet your other professionals. And it wasn't by accident during, and I'm only saying that, I'm not saying this just because Mark's sitting next to me in the box, I guess on my screen, is that through this network of federations, he reached out to me in the opening days of in October of 2018 when we were supposed to launch our campaign the next day and we couldn't do it, and offered his staff, his marketing staff, to help us out because we were just inundated with holding our community together in a wide range of areas. And so our relationship, our Federation relationship, really opened the door for his Federation to step in and help us in our time of need. And there were other federations, including JFNA, that were with us all along, and it was incredible, but it's only through that network and through building those relations.
Thank you so much. I wish we could spend more time on that. I actually think the last point you made about Mark stepping in and the collective power of the system really proves why we're all here and actually why we're so committed to this work. So in addition to the fantastic organizational overview, I think that is something to hold on to. And what I heard you say is kind of here are things that work, and here are things to stay focused on. And I know as a result, Kelly, you shared with me that you've changed your practice, like things that worked as a result in things that worked during COVID have now become part of your practice. And that is leading to growth for you. And I was wondering if you could just spend a minute sharing with everyone on the call kind of how you've changed your practice, what your new approach is, and the results that you're seeing.
Sure, I'm happy to. So it's funny, as I was listening to Brian, I realized, we can all share very similar initiatives, right? That we had to pivot and take certain things on and respond when necessary and really lean on our lay leadership to help us through things. And like Brian, I feel like I saw our lay leaders so much in these little boxes on Zoom screens, really, leaning in to support us and to lead us. And that was incredible. At the start of the pandemic, we were just 2 years into being a merged federation and foundation. And that relationship still felt really new in so many ways. For more than 20 years, we've been two very separate organizations. And, crisis hits 2 years into this new marriage. and it was hard. We had to let go of some staff, and And we really did need to lean on our lay leaders. But I really pivoted and dove into some of the Federation work. I really helped facilitate the emergency grants initiative, to take in the applications, to build the platform, to get to know the Federation emergency donors that were contributing, and to take part in those conversations so that I could not only learn, but that I could help engage in fundraising, which 2 years into our very new merger, I hadn't done yet. And so that was really new. And as a part, just to put the cherry on top of the crisis during this time, we also announced that our 30+ year executive director is going to go into retirement at some point. And we also had to take that into account and really make some decisions and look at relationships, as we thought he could be leaving. He holds a lot of relationships decades into his career. So what can we do? And, we took on a pivot with relationships and looking at the women that hadn't had a seat at the table or that weren't the voice of Federation. You may have seen them at social events or women's philanthropy events, but they weren't necessarily involved in the bigger picture in the conversation. And we identified women that we really wanted to ensure not only got more engaged, but as we brought our new female CEO in, could then start to build a relationship with her so that we would have relationships with the entire family and not just one member of a giving family. So we got to connect with new people that were really old people, right? They were in our system and they were on the list, but we didn't necessarily have personal relationships. And so, we were slightly different because we returned to the office in June of 2020, full force and full time. But we got creative with, Zoom meetings, outdoor meetings, Zoom events, like everyone did. But we were leaning in with faces and voices that we hadn't yet heard, and getting to know how they felt about Federation and what they knew about Federation. And that was key, especially, with the longevity of our CEO and him, leaving and going into retirement and bringing someone new in. The small staff that we needed to feel connected to those people so that, we could help through the transition and the process. And it's been incredible. It's been a real growth moment. I'm almost embarrassed to say this to such a large group of incredible folks, but when we built our foundation advisory board, it was all male. And, we are now just getting to the point this year, we'll invite our first female member of that new foundation advisory board. And that shouldn't be crazy in 2022, but historically it's just really been a very limited space. And so we're growing as professionals and lay leaders, but we're also really trying new things. And I think you have to be open to trying new things in any crisis. But if it doesn't work, try something else.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. I think hopefully those of you listening on the call are hearing strategies of, where to focus, how to build your team, and kind of like tried and true things that work, which I'm hearing relationship building, focusing on the individual. Meredith, one of the things that we're hearing as a consistent theme is how to tell the story. And all of us are asked how to tell the story and what's our philanthropic narrative. I think that's really what we're trying to define. How are we, this even came up yesterday, how are we talking about all of these priorities and how are we describing our work? And I know you've done such an incredible job in Rochester in positioning the Federation within the Jewish community and the larger community. I'd love for you to share some of your expertise and how to shape that story for the community.
Thanks, Amanda. Building on what Mark and Kelly and Brian have shared, I think all of this fits together so beautifully in storytelling. And I think, some of the storytelling is really about meeting the challenges of a system that has been around for, well over 100 years, I actually think over 125 years at this point. And, how does that resonate today in such a different marketplace? And yet we do have the history and the stories and so much success. And I think, what we've tried to focus on in Rochester is an understanding that, to Mark's point, there is opportunity for growth and there is opportunity to raise new dollars. And yet, one of the things that we saw is that our growth strategy couldn't necessarily be around the annual campaign, which may sound heretical, on FRDLX, but there is a way to position Federation as the key philanthropic organization in the Jewish community and for the Jewish community in the greater community as well, as you mentioned, by being open about what our challenges are and being strategic in how we face those challenges. And one of the things that we've really done is we've dug into data and really utilizing the data in our community to see how we can help grow the philanthropic efforts of the Federation through use of data. And that's where we've had some significant success in being able to say, annually, it's not that we haven't grown the campaign, it's been 1%, 2%, 3%, but it's not enough to meet all of the needs. So as we've had these crises around security, COVID response, Ukraine, being able to go back to our donors and say, here's what we see, here are the trends, can you help us? And can you help us grow? We've seen exponential growth in fundraising while the campaign has grown slightly. But it all goes back to being able to use data appropriately. And one of the things that we really did was shortening our campaign cycle. And we'll get into this later on in our session, but by recognizing that we were raising funds for the annual campaign all year long, we were losing the opportunity to have other supplemental giving opportunities because we were so focused on annual growth. We shortened our campaign cycle to 4 months. We increased our annual campaign, and then we had the bandwidth to actually raise significant dollars around our security efforts, multi-millions of dollars for security, for human services, for COVID, and for Ukraine. And I don't believe we would have had that same success in all of those other campaigns without the relationships mentioned earlier, without the communication, without the trust, but also I would add to that, without the data to support why we're making change and how it can be impactful. And the data then shows that kind of impact and being able to continuously use that data to increase the impact. Because I think there are things that we know intuitively, and sometimes the data supports that and sometimes it doesn't. So to fall back on what we know, because what our numbers show us, to make strategic change, I think is really key to addressing some of the challenges that we have in our system.
Amanda, can I just comment on one thing Meredith said?
I think would love you to.
It's great to hear about the different ways you've grown the campaign. I think we need to be careful that we don't get caught up in our own internal lingo and separating annual campaign from supplemental campaign, from special campaign, from emergency campaign. There are needs in the community, and nobody can do what we do to raise as much money as we raise to meet the needs. And I think we hinder our own ability to grow when we start bucketing these things into, well, this is the annual campaign, but that, we're only going to run that for 4 months, because then we're going to focus on a supplemental campaign. I think we want to raise as much money as we can. We want to use whatever language is necessary to engage our donors in understanding the needs and telling the story that inspires them to give. And at the end of the day, it's the federation's campaign that's raised X amount of dollars. And the more we can think in that kind of holistic, macro way, and not thinking about the specific campaigns we're running, the more we're going to raise gross dollars to support all the needs and all the work that's necessary in our communities.
Mark, I totally agree with you. And even here, we've actually stopped really talking about separating those pieces out, and we constantly talk about our total fundraising efforts because it's much more impactful and it tells the story so much better when we talk about the total dollars, whether it's campaign dollars or frankly foundation dollars. There's a whole philanthropic story to be told, and the dollars tell the whole story.
Yes, and I think what you're both saying is supporting our shift in recent years to thinking about total FRD and really thinking about the donor as an individual, being relationship based. What problem in the community do you want to solve, and we're the people to do it. That has been like the philanthropic narrative that we have been hearing across the board, and different people say it in different ways, but that's what we were hoping to get to, is kind of like, we are the experts, we are the need. All of the sessions later will be doing a deeper dive into what our panelists previewed today. I do want to, we are getting close to time, and I wanted to take a minute and just ask each of you to, if you had a minute to predict the future. I know this wasn't on our cheat sheet plan, but if you had a minute to predict the future in terms of growth over the next year for your teams and your campaigns, where are you going to be focusing, and what do you see in the next year as leaders in your campaigns? And I will call and start on Kelly.
Sure. So, I think as a foundation professional and, now 4+ years into our merger, I'm really seeing our role as a merged operation and taking a more active role in engaging the fund holders that not only do not support the Federation annual campaign, by finding those other opportunities like Mark and Meredith have both kind of touched on, where they can connect with Federation and bringing them the storytelling, the education, the impact of those dollars. Because like Brian touched on, we're really only able to do the emergency work we do because we've been here all along. But, we know here in our community, we have fund holders in our foundation that are not Federation annual campaign supporters, and we need to continue to bring them on board. And we had success with emergency campaigns doing that, and now we really need to push that for our annual campaign. So I'm excited to kind of continue that work and bring those donors to the table and be a good partner with our annual campaign leadership.
Terrific. Thank you. Meredith, how about you?
Yeah, I think collaboration is going to continue to be key. Collaboration between our partner agencies, between our lay leadership, and with our donors. And I think, one of the things that we're really spending a lot of significant time on strategically is donor stewardship, and ensuring that we are not only telling our stories, but that our donors can tell the stories too, in partnership with us, because I think we're headed for some turbulent times based on where the economy is. And based on the state of the world. I mean, as we look again, we are living still in very challenging circumstances. Things have changed, but they haven't really changed all that much. And I think that brings new challenges. And I think the more we can focus on donor stewardship, deepening those relationships and the partnership, and really leveraging the strength of our federations in our community to tackle the biggest challenges headed our way, the more success we have. And I think people really are looking to federations and the federation system really to tackle those big community challenges and questions. And we need to be here to do that for our communities.
Great. Thank you. Brian, last words.
So first of all, the way we operate, we do take a holistic approach. So we do multi-level asks, meaning when you solicit someone for the campaign, you also want to have a conversation around endowments, or we have tax credit program or supplemental giving. So we want to continually deepen that, work with our volunteer solicitors to help us either have those conversations with us or open the doors to do it. I do believe in the future I believe that there is significant capacity to increase our annual giving. I believe that the impact is, and the story is very, very powerful, but we have to go out and do it. And face-to-face is the ideal way to do it. But I do see the real potential growth is in plan giving and endowments in our foundation. That is going to be the most significant focus for the future. I think, at least in our community, but also nationally, we really need to think about that. One of the things that we've really eyed through our strategic plan is creating a center for philanthropic impact and trying to work with high potential families or individuals to house their assets with us, not the community foundations, not the Schwabs or Fidelities, but to house it with us and work with them on their overall philanthropy. And I believe that is really something that we're focused on in the future. And I would just ask everyone to really think about, where they're going with their planning and endowments in their own communities.
I love that. That's so great. Thank you, Brian. Mark.
I think for us, the real opportunity for growth is by going deeper with our existing long-term major donors. I think if all of us did an analysis on our campaigns, we would find that the majority of our long-term major donors have remained relatively flat in their giving for the last 3 or 5 or even more years than that. And I think we have to be brutally transparent and honest and talk about inflation, talk about the additional costs that it takes to run our own organizations, talk about the additional costs in urgent needs in our communities, talk about the people that we serve, the lowest income, the most needy in our communities, paying $4 or $5 a gallon for gas, paying $5 or $6 a gallon for milk or for a dozen eggs. We're seeing extended lines at food banks. We're seeing greater needs for mental health counseling. We're seeing more needs for emergency housing. And so the services that we provide in the community are being stretched even thinner because of inflation. And for a donor who's been giving 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 or $1 million for the last 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, that gift just doesn't go as far today as it went when they set that as their base level. And so going back to our most loyal, most committed donors who understand what we do, who care about what we do, and who've been giving a flat gift for many years, I think that's the area of greatest potential growth for us in the short term.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I want to thank all of our panelists for their wisdom and sharing their time and expertise and all the prep work that went into this Zoom. Each of the panelists will be leading sessions later on. So I hope if you've heard something here that you want to dive deeper into, that you take the opportunity to join us for the afternoon sessions today and tomorrow. And now it is my great privilege to turn FRDLX over to my friend and colleague, Shira Hutt, Executive Vice President at JFNA, who will be sharing with us some salient information and also some new resources that JFNA has developed to support the communities. Thank you all. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's been such a pleasure to be part of this opening session with all of you. And first, I want to start with where Amanda left off. I want to thank all of our presenters today. And I also want to take a moment to thank our FRDLX team for their thoughtful and hard work in putting together these 2 days. And in particular, I wanted to acknowledge Dirk Bird, Andrea Wasserman, and Evan Bindenglass for their very hard work. So thank you so much. And of course, I want to thank all of you for joining us, for learning with us, and for all that you do and continue to do to lead in your communities and in the system. This program today and program offerings of the like give us an opportunity to remind you that we think about how we can support you year round. And one way that we do that is through marketing resources. So I want to take a few minutes to give you a bit of a roadmap to understand some of those marketing resources, all of which, by the way, you'll be able to find on the FRDLX website. And also, this is information that we share throughout the year with your communities. But before we do that, actually, I want to invite all of you to take, if you have a pen in front of you, a piece of paper, or if you're the kind of person who writes things down on your phone, just to take a moment to write down 1 or 2 or even 3 takeaways from this morning's session. It can be an idea or an insight that you want to learn more about. Maybe it's a question that actually came up as a result of the conversation you've heard today. Maybe it's something that inspired you, or it could be all of those things. So I'm going to pause for a minute and let you think and write something down. Okay, thank you. If anyone is brave and wants to put their reflections in the chat, please do now or over the next few minutes. And I also want to encourage you to continue to take a moment throughout the next 2 days to just pause after each of these workshop sessions to record those takeaways. I know sometimes when I'm in programs like this, I take lots and lots of notes and I don't return to them because it's sort of overwhelming. So whether you do that or whether you don't take notes, but you still want to leave with that clarity so you can follow up, I encourage you to do that. So now on to our marketing resources. As you also just heard, we've come to expect the unexpected. And we know that staying agile to the needs of the moment is essential to our work. This has been a guiding principle in so much of what we do. And of course, it's something that we've carried with us as we've approached our marketing resource work. At the start of the 2022 calendar year, which feels like an eternity ago, we built annual campaign packages that included campaign messaging materials, donor gratitude packages, and lapsed donor packages. I want to make a note, and actually Kelly touched on this also a few minutes ago, that the donor gratitude package was actually something new in our marketing offerings this year. And it was developed as a result of hearing from you and your communities that sometimes we just don't do that enough, just simply saying thank you. And so we wanted to craft the materials this year to make sure that we're helping you do that. So I'm going to actually just share an example very briefly. And again, this is just one of many kits that you'll be able to find on the website. So hopefully everyone can see what I'm sharing with you. This is one of the messaging campaigns that was developed. Now we go forward. Shout out to UJA-Federation of New York, because we essentially copied, but this is, you know, a good kind of copy with their permission, because it was excellent. We wanted to lift it up and make it available to others. The other messaging campaign that you'll find is actually Do Good That Goes Anywhere, and it was the credit to that goes to Atlanta. They were the inspiration for that. So when you go through these toolkits, you'll find just how robust and comprehensive the resources are. Actually, this is just so you know, this becomes, I'm not going to click on it right now, but each of these are, sort of lead you to a whole world of resources and opportunities. And so I really encourage you to take the time to look through these, file these away for a time that you need them, whether it's videos, social media posts, and we really want to make sure that you access all of them. There's 4 of those packages that I mentioned that touch on those areas that I just talked about a moment ago, and you can find all of these again on the website. And then, of course, just on the topic, on the point of agility, we put these toolkits together, and then all of a sudden, February 24th came, and we knew that we had to adjust our approach. We had to provide you with more integrated and timely messaging and options, so that we could talk about the emergency campaigns that the moment that we were in, including, of course, the Ukraine crisis, and also our ongoing commitment to the current Ethiopian Aliyah, security, and more. So that also became an additional toolkit that you can find online. I'll just also say that when you go through those toolkits, you'll see that you can customize just about anything. Videos, I know there was a message in the chat at the beginning that you could even customize the sizzle reel that you saw at the beginning of this program. I know that our marketing team, which by the way is exceptional, I hope that you even got that from the few slides that I just shared with you. They want to hear from you. They want to customize these materials so that they can meet the needs of your community. And they also, by the way, we want to hear if there's something that we haven't provided you with that we might be able to help you with, and oftentimes if it's something that you need, we'll probably find out that other communities can benefit from it as well. So please call on us for all of your marketing support needs through these resources. So with that, we've come to the end of this session, and we're going to give you a bit of a break. So I want to just take a moment again to thank you all. This is just the beginning of our 2 days together. As Amanda mentioned earlier, we have programs starting this afternoon. We have a track for professionals, a track for lay leaders. We're going to start at 2:15. So hopefully you'll make your way a couple minutes before that. You can find all the links on the website. If for some reason you get confused or you don't know which Zoom link to use, this room will actually remain open until everyone is situated and ready to go at around 2:15. So you can always come back here. And I look forward to continuing to see you on the Zoom screen and to a great 2 days together. So thank you so much, and we'll see you back here at 2:15.